Okay. Um, Hi everyone. Good morning. I thank you so much for your patience and waiting to join the webinar. I will start the webinar now. So yeah, today I will just be walking you through, I guess, the process of making a visa application to study or to come and study in Ireland. I was also walk through, I guess, like the process of registering with the immigration as well. Just before I start, just a few housekeeping rules. Please keep your mics muted. That's very important so we can sort of like the process can flow smoothly. And if you have questions at any point during the presentation, please feel free to drop your questions in the chat. My colleague Frank, who I'll be introducing soon, would be monitoring the chat, and by the end of the presentation, we can take any questions that you would have. Before I introduce the hosts, I would like to deploy a quick quiz. Oh no, before that, actually, let me just introduce some of the other people on the call. With me today would be my colleague Frank. I think Jasmine and Shifta would also be joining the presentation at different points as well. So we would all be monitoring the chat and be able to answer any questions. So before I start the presentation proper, just to sort of like, I guess, set a baseline for where your knowledge is, I would just want to quickly like deploy a small poll or a Q&A. So please answer to the best of your ability. I will try to cover as much of so that way you have answers to whatever questions that I would ask. So just take a few minutes to answer these questions. I'll leave it up for about 2 minutes, and then I'll start the presentation. Okay. I hope you all can see the pose. Okay, yeah, I can see some of you have already started answering the questions. Okay, interesting. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think having these polls is always a good way, or questionnaires is always a good way to sort of like know where the knowledge level is. And hopefully by the end of this presentation, you should have like firm answers to this question. Okay, I would leave the poll up for another 20 to 30 seconds, and then I would start the presentation in earnest. Okay, great. Thank you so much for engaging with the poll. The outcomes seem very, very interesting. I would end the poll now and I would start the presentation. Um, So one of the first things that you need to consider is, do you even need a visa? So one thing to note is not everybody that is coming to Ireland to study requires a visa. So one of the first things that you need to do is to confirm if you actually need a visa. And this is heavily dependent on the nationality shown on your passport. And there's a very quick way to check online. And in this presentation, I have compiled a list of, this is according to the Irish immigration website. If your country is represented in this list, then you require or you're required to have or apply for a visa before you come to Ireland. And you can check as well on your own online at the Irish immigration website as well. This is a list of countries that do not require a visa to come to Ireland. But one thing that everybody must do, regardless of whether you require a visa or not, by the time that you come to Ireland, if you plan to study for beyond 3 months, you must register with the Irish immigration. And I'll go into detail about how to go about that towards the end of this presentation. But to kick off, I would just start talking about how to go about applying for an Irish study visa. So one of the first things that you must do is you need to go to the AVAT system and you need to complete the online application process first. So basically after you finish you go on that page to create an application form, you fill it out. You may also be asked to provide biometrics as part of this process, and I would also go into detail a bit about that towards the end of this presentation as well. So once you finish, then the form will contain information on how to submit the required documents. So there are many different procedures of submitting your required documents. By the end of filling out that online application process, you'll be able to know like what the next steps would be. So another place that I'd like to go is like what the required documents are. So just to give you sort of like a speed run or a general overview of the required documents. One of the documents that you need is the application form. I could see in the poll that only about 2% of students chose that the application form was one of the required documents. The application form is one of them. You also need to write an application letter, and I'll go into detail about each of these documents throughout this webinar. You also need an international passport. That's also very obvious, and you need to have a passport photograph. This has like a very specified specification as well. I'll go into detail about that. Also, you need the firm offer letter from DCU. You also need to be able to explain if there are any gaps in your education. Additionally, you need to show proof of payments of your fees. You also need to submit like your transcripts and results, and then your English test. You also need to have private insurance. And if you have any past visa refusals, you must disclose these. And finally, you need to show proof of finances, to be able to support yourself while you're studying at DCU. So basically, all these documents just help to sort of like paint a picture of who you are to whoever will be assessing the application. Basically, the Irish immigration wants to understand a few things about you, so do you have the required qualifications to study in Ireland? And have you gotten an offer letter? And do you have the finances to support yourself while you are here in Ireland? Just to go a bit more into detail about some of these documents. So for that application form, as I mentioned to you, so you must make your application using the AVAT online facility, and you should apply for a long stay multiple entry visa. That is otherwise known as the D visa. That's because you'll be coming to study and you'll be staying for over 1 year. Additionally, this is a very important part. You need to print out that form that you filled out, sign it, and date the form as well, because that will be one of the documents that you'll be submitting as part of your application. The next thing to do is your application letter. This is a very, very important document as part of your application. So um, you must include your full name, signature, and postal address. You must also detail the reasons why you want to come and study, or why you want to come to Ireland. So for your purposes, you'd be saying you have received admission to study this particular program, and you can go into detail about like why you have chosen that particular program and how it would help you in your future career as well. And you must also detail any family member that's currently lives or resides in Ireland or in the EU. So if you have any relations that live in Ireland, you must sort of like mention all of them. Additionally, and this is a very, very crucial piece, you must also include an undertaking that you would obey the conditions of your visa in full, not rely on public services, for example, public hospitals, or become a burden to the state. Additionally, you must also include that upon the expiration of your immigration permission, you would leave Ireland. That is very, very, very important. Um, Additionally, you must also provide justification if your current course is not related to your past experience. So basically, if you have chosen to do a program, say, for example, for your master's program, you have chosen to do something that is totally different from what you did in your first degree, you need to be able to explain and give valid reasons with documentary evidence as to like why you have made this change. And again, like going into detail about like why you have chosen to do that program and how it would help you in your future career as well. The next document, I don't need to go too much into detail about this, but you must have an international passport, and it must be valid for at least 12 months after the proposed date of arrival in Ireland. That's very, very important. You must also submit full copy of all your previous passports. And so you would go with like the physical original copy of your current international passport, but you must also make copies of all your any previous passports that you have had. The next thing is the passport photograph. So the passport that you submit, you must submit two color passport photographs, and in that link there, it will give you all the specifications for the exact size and how that passport photograph should look. Additionally, it must not be more than 6 months old. They want a very recent picture of what you look like now. You must also write your name and your visa application reference number on the back of that passport. This is because you are not allowed to staple or attach the passport to the form. And in case your passport gets shuffled or mixed around with others, they will be able to match it back with your form as well. Additionally, you also need to have your firm offer. Again, you need to have a firm offer from DCU. I know it looks different from what it is here, but this is just sort of like a sample. So that firm offer must confirm that you have been enrolled on a full-time course You must also give details of the course that you'll be studying and state the amount of fees payable for your course. Again, you don't need to worry too much about this one because we create the firm offer to meet the exact specifications for your application. So once you've gotten your firm offer, I think you're good to go. And the next thing, and again, this is also a very, very crucial point. Again, I think the process of making an application for visas are straightforward enough, but where sometimes like students tend to have issues is when they do not follow the instructions as they are laid out. So this educational gap, so if say, for example, you have been out of study for a period of 2 to 10 years, you need to be able to account for those gaps, So if, say, for example, you were working during that time, like from when you first graduated till when you are about to start your master's, you need to be able to show documentary proof. So if you are employed, you need to be able to show in your CV, also submit like your letters of employment as well to be able to account for every single year of study. So you give full details of your employment history and also provide documentary proof. Again, like there's no such thing as too much documentation. And the more documents you can submit to make your case, the better your chances of getting the visa. And also this educational gaps, you can also explain that in the application letter that you would write to the immigration officer as well. The next thing is also proof of fee payments. Again, I know in the question that I asked, a lot of you kept saying, yes, that DCU offers or provides fee receipts. I want you to pay attention that we do not provide fee receipts, and that's one of the reasons why we try to encourage you to make your fee payments using TransferMate. TransferMate most times would issue you a receipt that you can use. So you must pay at least 60% of your tuition fee. That's the minimum. And then you must also provide like a copy of the ETF to the Irish Bank of the college. So if maybe you did like a bank transfer, you would have like a teller or something. You need to keep that as well. And if you got a receipt, if you made your payment using TransferMate, you need to keep that as well. And this must also show details of the beneficiary's name. That's you, or that's us, the address and bank details, and the same details for the sender as well. Again, I want to reiterate that we do not provide fee receipts. The most that we can do is provide like a verbal confirmation. So I know there are certain fringe cases where the Irish immigration would reach out and say that you need to get like some sort of confirmation from the school. What you can do in that instance is to email us and we can send an email confirmation to you that we have received your fees. But typically, we do not provide fee receipts. The next thing is, in a way, as a way to prove that you have the qualifications to do the program, you also need to provide your transcripts and qualification as well. So you must provide evidence that you can follow your chosen course, and you prove this by submitting your transcript and results as well. The next thing is also the English proficiency test. And this one can be quite contentious because sometimes some students might get a waiver from the school for this test. But even if you have a waiver from the school, you must provide an English proficiency test as part of your visa application. And the requirements, you can find the requirements in this link here. And these are all the tests that they accept and the scores that are required as well. You must also provide proof of private health insurance. And you can find more information about what the private health insurance should entail in this link. Your chosen plan must cover for accidents and or emergencies and hospitalizations in Ireland. So there are numerous healthcare providers who offer plans for international studies, such as AON, Swiss Care, and Study Protect. I would recommend Study Protect because that was the one that I used as well, like when I was coming to study at DCU. And so they provide very comprehensive cover that meets all the requirements for the visa application. This part is very, very, very important because if you do not disclose your previous visa refusals, you will be automatically denied. So regardless of however long it has been since you got that refusal from whatever country, you must disclose it. So you need to be able to provide details of any previous visa refusals. You must also provide the original refusal letter. That's important. If you can, please try to find that original visa refusal. Again, you can also try to explain what circumstances led to your visa being refused and in your application letter as well to try to explain if it has been resolved, but you must disclose it. Again, this is not, if you disclose your previous visa refusal, they would not automatically reject your application, but they need to know what the circumstances were so that they can make like an informed decision on your application. And then this is for the proof of finance. I think this is another part that can be quite confusing or that can cause some issues for students like when they're making visa applications. So you need to be able to prove that you have the finances to support yourself while you are studying in Ireland. So they've made it a bit more streamlined now, so there's a financial summary form that you would have to fill where you disclose if you have sponsors, how much each sponsor would be supporting you with. You must also show evidence that you have immediate access to at least 10,000 euros towards your year of study. You must also provide a 6-month bank statement, so it must be on headed paper with the name, address, account number, and account type. Additionally, large or irregular lodgements must be fully explained. So say, for example, if a typical transaction in a bank account is 200 euros, this is just a hypothetical, 200 euros every week, and then all of a sudden there is a lodgement of 500, 1,000, 10,000 euros into that account. You need to be able to explain why that amount of money was paid and how you have access to it. So say, for example, if you've got a student loan, you can easily explain that, and you must also provide documentary evidence as well. So if say you sold a property or your sponsors sold the property, they need to be able to provide proof that they owned that property and that they have transferred ownership to someone else as well. And where sponsors are involved, I know I mentioned sponsors a few times during this presentation, but where sponsors are involved, it must be clear that documents relate to them. So the documents must have or bear the sponsor's name. You must also list each person sponsoring you. Again, I've seen cases where more than 2 or 3 people are sponsoring a single student to come and study. That's fine. You just need to be able to list each person sponsoring you, and you must give clear details of their relationship to you. And you must also provide evidence of how you are linked to this person. So again, family relationships are a lot easier to prove because you would have birth certificates or marriage certificates or documentary evidence that you can prove that you are related to whoever is sponsoring you. And you can find a lot more information about finances in this link down below. Okay, so I know that is a lot of information to digest, and I can see that the chat is very, very active. And I'll just keep going with the presentation, and then, as I said, like we will take as many questions as we can in the chat. Again, please try to keep your questions as general as possible because we cannot provide answers to individual cases. But just to reiterate, all the documents that are required, your application form, application letter, international passport, passport photograph, firm offer letter, explanation of gaps in your education, payment proof of tuition payments, transcripts and results, English test, proof of private insurance, and disclosure of past visa refusals. And then finally, you need to prove that you have the finances to support yourself while you're studying in Ireland. So there might be some other required documents for particular countries. So in the case of India, you are also required to complete the police clearance certificate. And you must also get the supplementary student application form. This one is just specific to Indian students. Also, as I mentioned at the top of the presentation, you may be required to provide your biometric information as part of the visa application process. So this refers to the capture of your fingerprints and in some cases, a digital image of your face as well. So residents of China, Hong Kong, India, Nigeria, and Pakistan are required to provide fingerprints as well. So biometric capture will take place when you are submitting your documents at an Irish application center. And you can find more information about the Irish application centers. Typically use VFS Global. So you can find more information on this link. It may also be necessary in certain circumstances for your print to be taken a second time. And you will be required to return to the BSc. So if maybe there was any issue in capturing your fingerprints the first time, you might be required to come in a second time for your prints to be taken again. But yeah, one thing that I forgot to mention, one thing about the visa application process is the sooner you can start the process, the better it is for you. A good rule of thumb is you need to send in your application at least 8 weeks before you are to arrive in Ireland. So if you do the calculation, your application you need to give at least 8 weeks for a decision to be made on your application. Okay, and then I also mentioned that regardless of whether you require a visa or not to enter Ireland, you must register with the immigration if you plan to study at DCU. So one of the first things obviously would be to report to immigrations when you arrive at Dublin. For students who require a visa to enter Ireland, it is always a good practice to have the documents that you use to make your visa application readily accessible when you are at the airport. So having it like in your backpack so that in case the immigration officer were to ask for specific documents, you'll be able to produce that. Additionally, you now need to register with the Immigration Service Delivery and apply for an IRP within 90 days of your arrival. I'll go a bit into detail about how to register. So again, since all of you would be coming to study in Dublin, you would need to make an appointment by calling this number. So once you get to Ireland and you have registered, you would need to call this phone number. And then once you book an appointment, you receive an email telling you what documents to bring with you. During that appointment, your documents will be reviewed, your photographs and fingerprints will also be taken, and you will also have to pay a registration fee of 300 euros. So what documents are required? Again, for some documents might not be required for some students, but these are the five main documents that you need. So your international passport, your student confirmation letter, that's a confirmation that you have registered on the program, proof of finances, proof of payment of your fees, and private insurance. So to go into detail about every single one of them, so for your international passport, again, you need to make a copy of the biometric page of your current valid passport. And this is the page that shows your photograph, passport number, and date of birth. You also need a student confirmation letter. So this letter will be from DCU and it will be dated on or after the date your course commenced, confirming your enrollment as a student. So once you get to Ireland, you would need to register at DCU, and then you can request for this confirmation letter from our registry page, and it will have all the details that are required by the immigration service. Also, for students who need a visa, you don't need to prove that you have the finances to support yourself because you have already done that during the visa process. But for students who do not require a visa, you must prove that you have direct access to at least 4,500 euros if you are staying more than 6 months in Ireland. You also need to show proof that you have paid at least 60% of your fees, and this evidence should also be visible on your letter of enrollment as well. And then also very similar to this application, you need to show that you have private medical insurance as well. Yeah, so you can find some more useful links here. We would be disseminating the recording of this webinar and the presentation as well, so you can go back and reference it anytime. So you can find some useful links here. And then the upcoming webinars after now. So next week, we'll be doing a guide to DCU accommodations. We will also be doing a guide to off-campus accommodations on the 29th. And then an international student panel on the 5th of June. So if you have not registered for these upcoming webinars, please ensure to do so. Again, I'll get to your questions. I know you guys have a lot of questions. But just to go through, please, if you have not joined the Going app, please join it. Again, this is a very good way to meet your fellow peers and incoming students and current students as well. And then, it can help you to prepare for your arrival in DCU as well. So just check your email for the registration link. Make sure to also follow us on our social media platforms. Once again, thank you so much for listening. Now, I will turn it over to Frank, who can go through the chat, and I can take some questions from you guys.
Yeah, thanks so much, Priya. That was a great presentation with a lot of information. But yeah, just a reminder that we will send out the recording and the slides, so you'll be able to access them after they'll be posted on the event page where you're registered. So yeah, there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of duplicate questions, but we'll try to get through everybody's. We might not get through them all, but we'll do our best. So the first question, Priya, is just, can an education loan be used as payment proof?
Yes, an education loan can be used. So if you got a loan from a bank, again, you need to be able to explain that, oh, you've gotten this loan from the bank, and you have used that to make your payment to the school. Yeah. So I don't think there's any issues with education loans.
And then someone's just asking, what's the most important thing which visa offices see in a candidate? Is there a thing that's more important than anything, or is everything kind of looked at equally?
To be honest, I think everything is kind of looked at equally. You need to just pay attention and be as precise when you are making your visa application. Again, like they would not reject your application if you miss just one thing, but try to ensure that you pay as much attention to all the instructions that are required and just follow the instructions basically. Yeah.
And then the next one is, what are the most common reasons for visa rejection, and is there any way that they can avoid them?
So again, like some of the most common reasons for visa rejections, as I mentioned, like if you do not disclose past visa refusals from other countries, that is a very sure way of getting your visa rejected. Again, proof of finances. If you cannot fully explain and show that you have access to at least 10,000 euros towards your studies, or you have not made your fee payments, that could be another ground for rejection. Another one as well is if you do not have that undertaking to follow the rules and also to give upon the expiration of your permission, that could be another ground for rejection. Again, as I mentioned, like just pay attention to as much of the instructions as you can, and I think you should be okay.
And then on the note of rejection, if they don't know anybody in Ireland, does that hamper their chances? I know you were mentioning about knowing people in Ireland and making that known.
It does not. It does not hamper your chances whatsoever. Like as I mentioned at the top of the presentation, I originally came here to study as a student at DCU, and when I was coming to Ireland, I knew nobody in Ireland, and I made the visa application myself. So that has no bearing whatsoever on the chances. Please, can you mute yourselves?
And then the next one is just about the passport. So do they need a copy of the whole passport or just the first page?
I think they need a copy of the entire passport. So again, like if you can bring in physical copies of like your old ones, that's great. But most times, like at the VFS centers, they would ask you to make copies of the passport. So it just depends on the VFS in each country.
So the best thing to do is to bring the physical passport if they can.
Yes, if you can, yes.
And then for the copies of the previous passports, does that include cancelled passports?
Yes, so it includes cancelled passport as well. Again, like they just want to, I guess, get a full immigration picture of of the applicants, so they want to know like what countries have you gone to, what visas have you applied for. So as many passports as you can provide, the better as well for you.
Yeah, there's a few questions as well just about electronic fee receipts. I think you went over that in the presentation as well. So DCU doesn't provide fee receipts. We're in contract with immigration, so we let them know that you've paid your fees. And if you use TransferMate, you can then use the confirmation from TransferMate in your visa application as well. Is there anything else you want to add to that, Priya?
No, I think that covers it. Yeah, we do not provide any receipts. As Frank said, yeah, we are in contact with the immigration office as well. But if you do require like a verbal confirmation, you can always send an email if you have paid fees, and we can send you an email confirmation. But please try not to send this message unless you need it.
Yeah, and that email you should contact is fees@dcu.ie. And then the next one is what is the last timeline to submit their English language requirement for an or to get their unconditional offer letter?
Again, like the sooner you can submit it, the better your chances. I think typically they will give you at least until 2 weeks before the resumption of or before the start of the semester. But again, you need to bear in mind that you need to make your application for your visa at least 8 weeks before you want to arrive in Ireland. So the sooner you can get the firm offer, the better your chances of applying for the visa.
And then for the gaps in education, should they also include any gaps in their work history?
Yeah, so if say you have a gap in your education and there was a gap in your work history as well, you need to be able to explain like what you were doing within that time. You know, sometimes like it may be maybe due to a sickness or something that stopped you from going to school or working. You just need to be able to provide explanation so that they can paint a good picture of what you were doing in the period between the last time that you were in school and now that you have chosen to apply for the program.
Great. And so if they're offered a fee waiver or a scholarship of any form, how do they prove to immigration that the fees have been paid? Is that just with a scholarship confirmation letter or?
Yeah, basically. So yeah, I got offered a scholarship as well. When I came, but it was like by a government body in Nigeria. So one of the ways, obviously, they made the payment to DCU on my behalf. So I was able to get the bank statements from the sponsors. And then I also provided the letter that they gave me as well. So yeah, if you get a scholarship or a fee waiver from the school, there will be a letter to say or state that you have gotten that, so you need to include that in your application.
Yeah, the next few questions I think we've gone over already. So one's just about when they should start applying. So just as soon as possible, give yourself at least 8 weeks if you can.
Yeah.
Just about receipts and confirmation mails. We've already gone through that. Are transfer mates receipts considered as proof of payment? Yes, they will be.
Yes.
And then we'll also be in contact with immigration, as you mentioned. Then there's the stuff about start dates, which I already answered in the chat. Is there a specific English test to take even if you've studied in England for 3 years? Somebody's just asking.
So again, most times it's always like depending on where you're coming from. Like I know when I was applying, I had done my first degree in England, so I did not provide any English test. But sometimes the immigration office might require it. So I think sometimes it's always like to just be on the safe side. One exam that you can do that is not too expensive could be like the Duolingo English test, for example. Once you do that and you get the requirements, you can just include that in your application as well.
Great. Somebody's just asking about, do they accept credit availability from credit cards as for like the proof of funds?
I don't think credit cards would count as proof of finances. They need to see that you have ready access to that amount. So that means that that money is actually in your possession. Yeah.
Somebody's just asking about their brother being their sponsor then. So is it proof of his passport, proof of a relationship, or is it better proof they can provide?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Someone's just asking about their brother being their sponsor. They're wondering if they can provide a copy of his passport for proof of relationship.
Yes, so their brother, yes. So if you can provide their passports, birth certificates as well, as long as like it just shows that you guys bear the same name, I think that's proof enough. Yeah.
For undergraduate students, do they have to show 4 years of funds? So would it be a total of 40,000?
Yeah, so the undergraduates, it's a bit more tricky than the masters. Again, what they pay most attention to would be the first year. But for the undergraduates, they also need to be able to see that whoever is sponsoring you can raise the money to sponsor you throughout the entirety of your program. So ways that you can prove that you have, I guess, ready access or immediate access to the funds for the subsequent years would be if maybe your sponsor is working and they have a salary, they can provide like their pay slips to show that in the subsequent years they will be able to save up that amount to support you. But yeah, if you can prove that you have up to 30,000, great. Again, like I know not everyone would have that amount, but the more proof you can show, the better your chances of getting it.
So then there's just a few other questions about documents to prove relationships. So if it's a direct relative, passports is probably the best bet, is it?
Yeah, if it's a direct relative, passport, again, birth certificates, again, like some people also even include like pictures that they have together with those relatives. Just anything to be able to prove that, yeah, this person is related to you and you have some sort of relationship with them.
And then for visa refusals, is that from any country or just visa refusals to Ireland?
Any country in the world. Because if they find out that you've been refused a visa from another country that you do not disclose, as I mentioned, that would be an automatic rejection.
Great. And is there then any specific documents required to support their like gaps in relationships or gaps in education or gaps in careers?
Yeah, so again, as I mentioned, like providing your CV, so just detailing, okay, what you have been doing, even if you were working, say maybe as like a sole trader or something, you started a business, you would be able to provide like proof of like maybe certificate of incorporation. If you were in employment, you'd be able to provide like your employment contract. You'll be able to provide pay slips, just anything that you can use to account for whatever gaps exist. I'll give an example of myself. Like when I was coming, I had been away from like I finished my undergraduate degree in 2016 and I applied to DCU in 2019. So there was like almost a 3-year gap. But within that time, I was working in an NGO. So I was able to provide the contract, the letter of employment. I was also able to provide pay slips as well, that just showed that it accounted for the exact time that I was away from study. So any documentary proof that you can, shows that, okay, this is what you were doing within the time and that you were away from studying is good.
And then there's a couple of questions about if people need accommodation documents for the visa application.
Honestly, not necessarily. Like when I was applying, I know obviously like in the form they would ask you questions about like where you'll be staying when you're in Ireland. Again, you can use temporary addresses. It doesn't have to be like your permanent address. Yeah, because in my case, I used an address that I got from Airbnb and books like a temporary accommodation for a week, and I used that address in my application. So it's not like a huge part, but again, bearing in mind that in Ireland or in Dublin, accommodations can be quite tricky. The sooner you can start the process of finding accommodation, the better it is for you.
I'll just mention again that there is a lot of questions coming in and we will try to cover all of them. We might skip over certain questions because we've already answered them or we've answered a very similar question that we think answers it. So don't feel like we're skipping your question if it's not getting asked. Okay, so somebody's just asking about ongoing unrest in Ireland regarding immigration, and does DCU offer any advice to international students being affected? I know it's a very sensitive question, but it's very small, isolated situations, which I think that does happen in for the majority of the part. Most Irish people are very welcoming to international students and to people immigrating to the country. You'll find that everybody in DCU is very welcoming. These situations are kind of happen in very isolated situations and affect very small numbers of people, and they're happening because of very small numbers of people. So it's not something that I would be majorly worried about coming. And for the most part, every Irish person that you meet is going to be very accepting and very welcoming. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Priya.
Yeah, no, I would completely echo what you have said. That, yeah, again, yes, I know some of these issues have started bubbling up to the surface, but again, it's in very siloed instances. Again, as with like, going to any new place, just follow like the required like safety precautions. But from my own experience, I have just had like very warm experiences with of being here in Ireland as well.
So someone's just asking about then the average time a visa outcome can take to be known. So as Priya mentioned, I think we just advise given at least 8 weeks to get the visa application completed. It's just the sooner you apply, the better. The more time you give yourself, the easier it is to make sure you come and get settled. Then, so a lot of these have just already been asked. I'm an Indian student residing in Kuwait for the past 24 years. I want to know what are the visa requirements if I'm exiting from Kuwait. Is it the same type as exiting from India or otherwise? Maybe Jasmine, you might be able to answer that one.
Is Jasmine on the call? And to be
Jasmine is
honest,
here.
okay.
Yeah, hi, Frank. Thank you for that. I think since you are an Indian student, I believe you have an Indian passport, so you'll have the same immigration and the visa procedure being an Indian student. So you need to follow the same process.
Okay, great. So then the next one is okay if they write their name and application number by hand rather than print it out?
Yes, like, yeah, the printing doesn't mean that you need to print it on a computer. Like, just write it with a pen on your passport. Yeah.
So then there's another question about accommodation. We just ran over that. If there is any backlog but cleared in the following semester, does it create problem? I'm not sure what, I don't get that question. And maybe if you just want to ask it again. So someone's just asking about the supporting document for the initial €500 paid as a deposit because they got no receipt or confirmation mail. Again, I think it's just the transfer mate receipt works perfectly for that.
And again, like, so even if you maybe made the payments using like your bank card or something, like there should be a statement or something on your credit card to say that you paid that amount. Yeah. So whatever documentary proof you can show from your side, I think that should be fine.
So then for non-EU students, do they need to pay full fees or just the 60%? Just the 60% before your visa application, and then the remainder of the fee has to be paid before the start of semester 2. What do we need to do to get the official offer letter? So you just have to meet the conditions in your conditional offer, whether that be an English requirement, the providing of your results from your university, whatever that condition is. Once you meet that condition and send it in, they then follow up in the next week or two after that with your firm offer letter. Again, some of these questions have just been answered already. So someone's asking us about, does 60% mean the total tuition fee or 60% of the total tuition fee deducting the scholarship amount? So if you've received the scholarship will be deducted from the second installment. So you must pay the full 60%, and then your scholarship and your deposit will be deducted from your second 40% installment. So you have to pay the full 60% before your visa application. Do we accept Duolingo English tests? Yeah, we do accept English tests. Someone's just asked, the same person, I think, just repeated the question about the immigration unrest. So we've already ran over that. Again, yeah, some people are just sending the same questions again. Just, I think probably because we haven't answered them, they're just trying to send them in again. Sorry, I'm just running through to see if there's anything that we haven't answered yet.
Yeah, I think I can see something about like the charges for medical insurance. So I think I'll just take that question.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so it varies from company to company. The study protects that I mentioned, I'm not sure exactly what their charges are now, but I know it would range from 160 euros to about 220 euros. So it will be somewhere in between that amount. But once you go into their website and you fill out the form, like they would have like a preliminary form that you just fill out like some of your details, and then to give you a quote for that. So I think quote should be within that range.
Great. Somebody's asking about their brother lives in Ireland and they'll be living with them. So can they submit his address proof to
Yes.
show that he won't require accommodation? Yeah, I think
Yes.
that's perfect. Then there's a couple more questions about the 60% thing. So as we just mentioned, yeah, pay the 60% and then your scholarship and your deposit will be deducted from your second installment. So make sure to pay that full 60% before your visa application. So somebody's still unclear on, is education alone enough for showing the proof of the 10,000 euros for living?
So with the education loan, like, did you get the education loan to cover your tuition? And so I guess like it would depend on the amount, but
So what they say here is their loan includes their tuition fees, their accommodation, and all living expenses.
yeah, then I think that's fine. Jasmine, do you want to add anything?
Yes, so ideally, if you're taking an education loan, you should not take only education loan for the living expenses. It has to be clubbed with your fees, tuition fees as well. And even if it's a 100% education loan, it is still recommended to show some decent amount in your bank account because you need to have a liquid amount. But just to answer the question, 100% loan, living loan has to be clubbed with the fees amount. Plus, some amounts needs to be maintained in your bank for 6 months to submit the visa applications.
Yeah, great. Another question they had, the same person, was just any specific documents to show their relation with their uncle who's their sponsor. So I think again, it's the passport if that's possible, birth certs. Again, you can use photos, you can use extra stuff like that. So how early can we arrive in Ireland provided our visa is almost ready?
So like, is it after they've gotten their visas?
I think so is what they mean. Yeah, I'm guessing they mean when their visa has been accepted.
Yeah, so once your visa has been accepted, I think you can start arriving whenever you feel comfortable. Again, like, just bear in mind that 3 months after, like, you need to register with the immigration at least 3 months after you have arrived. So it would be good to arrive closer to the time when you'd be doing the registration, so that way you can register and get that letter to enable you to make the application for the registration with immigration. Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm just trying to find questions that we haven't ran over yet.
So,
I know it's just gone past 11, so we'll try to answer a few more and then we'll probably have to wrap things up. I think you ran over. Yeah, go ahead, Jasmine.
Yeah, Frank, I can see one question they've asked, that is there any interview for your visa application? Well, just to answer that, no, there is no interview for your visa application. You just need to submit a cover letter as part of the visa application, and as pre-mentioned, the things that's supposed to be mentioned in the cover letter. Unless there is something fishy in the documentations and they call you for an interview, but otherwise there is no interview for the visa student visa application.
Great. By when can we expect the orientation confirmed dates email? I think that expects to go out very soon. You can most likely think that it's going to be in the 2 weeks previous to the start date, which is the 9th of September. It's 2 weeks before, it'll probably be virtual stuff, and the week before it'll probably be in-person stuff. That should be confirmed pretty soon, but you can take it for most likely that it's going to be in them 2 weeks before the start date. So once visa is approved, what are the specific requirements for Irish immigrations once we land in Ireland? So I think Priya ran through that in great detail in the presentation. So the best thing, if you're still unsure, is probably just to go back when we send out the recording and have a look through what you need to do to register once you land in Ireland. If they're coming from a non-visa country, is it acceptable just to register with immigration in person when they land?
Yeah, so when they land, they would also need to first register with DCU, get that letter before, and then make an appointment with the immigration. So you can't do the registration at the airport.
So the same guy is asking again, the initial €500 deposit is not paid through TransferMate. It is directly through the college website. Please ask what proof to be submitted. So the transaction that you made is enough proof. As we said, we're in contact with the immigration service, so they'll know that you have paid it. But yeah, whatever bank you use, the transaction is enough proof to show that you paid the €500, as you already mentioned. So the interview process, Jasmine just ran over some of that. Are there high rejection rates of visas? If so, what's the advice to avoid it? I don't know, Priya, if you want to run over that.
So, like, are they asking,
is the rejection rate high, and how do they avoid rejection? I suppose that's a very broad question, but
yeah, it's very, very broad. To be honest, like, I think it's again, as long as you follow the instructions on the Irish immigration website, which I've tried to distill into this presentation, you should be fine. Just follow the instructions, give them, like, write the letter, explain yourself as much as possible, and provide as much documentation to prove whatever you claim as possible. I think you should have no issues with rejection. Yeah.
Great. So I just running through the last few. So again, if you have specific questions in your case, you can always email DCU Global Recruitment at dcu.ie. The email will be in the presentation, and we can help you there. I know there's just a lot of questions coming in, so we might not have got to everything. I think we've tried to cover as many broad questions as possible. We don't want to go into covering very specific questions on the call just because it's such a big audience. We don't want to answer such specific things to people's cases. But again, if you have questions, you can always email us at any time, and we'll try our best to help you there too.
Yeah, I just saw a question about the health insurance. So it says Study Protect has 12 months plan. Since we arrive in Ireland a few days before the start of the course, will there be a little more than 12 months? No, to be honest, like, I don't think it matters. As long as you have that 12 months plan, you should be fine. Like, that should cover the requirements for the insurance. So yeah, I think that's okay.
And can travel insurance suffice for a master's program? I'm guessing that's in terms of health insurance, but I think you need to have separate health insurance as well as travel insurance, don't you?
Yes, so as long as I think travel insurance could be fine as well, but it needs to have specific coverage, So in the presentation, I put a link to the Irish immigration website where it gives information about, like, what needs to be included in the insurance. So as long as your travel insurance covers all those parts and it covers you for the duration of your program, I think you should have no issues.
So someone's just asking about university accommodation. So we do have a webinar next week on accommodation where we'll go over everything about accommodation. So the best thing is to attend that, and we'll go through that in great detail. If they got 105 instead of 110, will DCU accept? So DCU doesn't make any adjustments to scores. So you have to get 110. They don't make any exceptions. So if you didn't get 110, you just have to try retake the exam and submit the required score. When you're applying for student visas, do you choose short or long-term visa option?
It's the long-term visa, the D visa. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think we've covered off everything that we can. Just to reiterate, you can always contact DCU Global Recruitment at dcu.ie with any specific questions, and we can help you there. And we're sorry if we didn't get to your question. There's probably over 150 questions there that we've gone through, and we've tried to cover everything possible. But just, yeah, thank you again to Priya and Jasmine for all the help and information. I think we've tried to cover as much as we can, and we hope that it gives you a good insight into your visa application and helps you with the process. And we hope you look forward to coming to DCU.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add, Priya or Jasmine?
No, that's it. Like, yeah, thank you so much for being attentive, and thank you so much for engaging and asking as much questions. And again, if you need any more clarification, as Frank said, please just send an email to CCC Global, and we'll just respond to you as soon as possible. Yeah.
Great. All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
See you later.
Everyone.